Hey, Twisted people, welcome to
Hey.
live version of The Stand, episode 5, Fear and Loathing in New Vegas, or what it was originally when I first titled this video, Suspicious Minds. There was a title change, and here we are. And it seems appropriate because we were in Vegas this episode. Hey, y'all, it's your girl, Twisted Woman, CKR, aka Chauncey K Robinson. And on this show, I am joined by my co-host,
Michael Damian, aka Michael Damian.
And I'd just like to welcome everyone who is joining us in the live. We always appreciate you in the chat and being with us here as we go through the episode. And also all of you who are watching the replay. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, so you are the first person to know when I post all of my videos on this channel where we love horror and getting creepy together. So thanks for joining us. And okay, so we have the 5th episode. We're halfway through. We are now halfway through the show because there's about 9 or 10 seasons. 9 or 10, should have been a couple of seasons, 9 or 10 episodes. So, Michael, what are your overall thoughts of episode 5? Oh, and before I do that, I just want to throw out a question for this video, which is, so we'll get into it later. Be sure to think about, who did you identify with most in this episode? Which character did you identify with most when it comes to the episode this time around? Okay, so Michael, overall thoughts of this episode?
I enjoyed it. It was very action-packed, and for all the people who love the original made-for-TV movie series, Don't Fear the Reaper came back at the very end. And also, we got to look at Vegas, and Kiss was playing, Lick It Up. Oh, that was awesome. There was like trauma, there was drama, there was suspense, and there were friendships, and this is broad, but I loved it. And they put everything together, and it was great. I had a great time. I loved it way more than I did going into the show as a whole.
So would you say this is your favorite episode so far, or what?
It might be. I think it might be because we actually get to get a look at Vegas.
Okay.
We get a look at the decadence, the debauchery, a lot for CBS. Like, I thought I was watching Stars. Because they put like porn in everything, but there was a lot of it. That's not why it was my favorite. I loved it more so for the musical choices.
That almost menage a trois didn't get you.
Yeah, no, that was like, what am I watching? Like, this Thrills? Like, what Passion Cove? What's happening here?
Passion Cove.
Yeah.
I will maintain that episode 3 is still my favorite of this season so far. It has not been topped, to be honest. I thought episode 3 had a lot of balance. I did enjoy this episode. I was excited because I thought, wow, we are going to get more of Vegas this time around, because it said New Vegas once I saw the title change. So I was excited about that, but I wrote in my notes, could have used more Vegas. I felt like we went to Vegas only to spend more time at the at Boulder again, more time than usual. I will say I was very excited about the fact that we did not have too many flashbacks. We had a brief flashback with Dayna, but for once, I think, like we were saying in the last live stream, that we believe that we are now firmly located in the present when it comes to this story, which I am very happy about, because we had so many flashbacks in the first 4 episodes. So I'm glad to say that we are now firmly present. And Brent Showers, who is joining us in the chat, hey Brent, thanks for joining us, said they did show the slavery, straight up gladiator arenas. That's true. They very much showed what Vegas was about a bit. Although, and Michael and I actually had a conversation outside of the show, and we're going to have it here too, when I gotta say I was a little underwhelmed by the debauchery of Vegas. And I don't know what that means, and I want to explain that a bit more as we go into the out of the episode, but I definitely felt like we could have seen a little bit more of just how depraved things are there. Yes, people seemed more mean. People seemed more not so nice and loving and kumbaya as as Flags called Mother Abigail's place. But I also felt like, well, it kind of seemed like regular Vegas in a way, except for the gladiators, as Brent pointed out. And Brent is also saying we have only seen Floyd. Was hoping we would have seen more like Trash Can Man and others in Flag's inner circle. Actually, yeah, I agree with that as well. Once again, that's why I said my main note when it came to this episode was could have used more Vegas. When you change the title from Suspicious Minds to Fear and Loathing in New Vegas, you would think we'd be more in Vegas. And I felt like we got more Boulder this episode, which is I was a little underwhelmed by that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, from a perspective of the book, I believe, was written in the 70s, if I'm correct.
Yeah, it was like late 70s.
Yeah, late 70s. You had a lot of the people during that time, and I'm making no comparison now to politics, but and I have a minor in history, and I studied this moment in time, so I'm not just pulling stuff out of my ass or Google, but
or Wikipedia.
Yeah. But like back in the day, late 70s, that was like the rise of, or not the rise so much, but that was like pre-Reaganism. And right when the evangelical movement was taking a stronghold in the Republican Party. So all throughout the 70s, the religious right was like reigning with, you have with Nixon and all throughout there, leading up to Reaganism. So you're right before Reaganism, where the idea of what is sinful is wildly this. Everything that is happening in Vegas with the fights in the pits and the menage a trois and the all-out like orgies that are happening, and nobody caring about like they're in public or anything like that. That into the mind of a 70s person, like Stephen King, kind of just your average run-the-mill white dude who was probably raised with this sense of conservatism in America at the time. Everything that happened in Vegas is the devil's playground at that time. And I don't know if the conflict has been amped up to today's standards, where a lot of that is now open. People are okay with people using individual drug use. People are okay as long as it's consensual.
Yeah.
With sexual escapades. And it's really not like we have MMA. It was almost like somebody had an orgy at an MMA fight.
Yeah, UFC fight was going on. Yes, people died, of course, and that was where the most extreme stuff happened. But even I was like, well, this kind of seems like a UFC fight a little bit. People are fighting except the fact that someone might die. So I don't know. I just felt like we could have, and Damon Robinson is also saying in the chat, I like this episode, did need more debauchery.
You got to up it. You got to have more debauchery.
And that's what I meant when I said, and I totally get what you're saying about the fact that this was this was written in the 1970s. But if they're updating it as this is an adaptation for 2021, I feel like maybe because we've gotten more desensitized to things, I was just kind of like, I'm not going to say this is a regular day in Vegas. And then people are going to ask, what do you do when you go to Vegas? But because I do love Vegas, but it was more so like, okay, aside from the people getting killed and people having maybe kinkier sex, perhaps, live and let live or whatever, it was kind of like, well, this doesn't seem too horrible, except the fact that they're, crucifying people. That's probably the other thing. The crucifixion and people dying in the thing. But other than that, I was like, okay, I felt like we needed a bit more. And Damon Robinson in the chat is also saying it was a lot of sex. You were just talking about that, how there was a lot of sex happening.
I was shocked. In this episode. I thought that I was watching a Starz program and not CBS, because CBS to me is like Big Bang Theory and How I Met Your Mother. And I guess I'm just so like tunneled into that one. I don't watch a lot of CBS, unfortunately, but I love CBS. And you got great programming. But sorry to sound like Trump there for a second. Yeah, like Big Bang Theory, they're like the Cheesecake Factory, and it's clearly a set, and it is not the Cheesecake Factory if you've ever been to one. Mm-hmm. The Stand had production quality. It has people banging and it has people sinning, and it's just mind blowing to me that this is not my mom and dad's CBS.
Well, that's why it's the streaming service where people have to pay to get this quality Skinamax kind of retelling of The Stand.
2 girls, 1 guy in the end of the show, like both of the women are in lingerie and they're in like a gorgeous penthouse in Vegas. And like, wow, this is what that prescription gets you.
Yeah. Okay. So we are all overall saying that Vegas could have been a bit more scandalous and whatnot, but we did get a glimpse of it. And so we had some other major things that happened this episode. We got, a little bit more. And in Vegas, we got Dayna and how her storyline was going. Dayna, I want to say Dayna is Dayna. Dayna with a Y, as they said in the episode. And I think with this episode, we got a little bit more of her. We got a lot more of Harold this episode. And I want to talk about that because, I got some feelings about what we got with Harold this episode. We got Larry breaking into Harold's place, and we find out that Harold has cameras everywhere somehow, even though they've been without power for who knows how long. But somehow he was able to put cameras everywhere. So we got to talk about that. And then we saw basically, Tom Cullen, our boy Tom Cullen, that spelled run, but he wasn't able to really understand the note, which sucked. That was a sad moment a bit. Yeah. And so those were kind of the major things. And also Nadine's weird conflict. So we got to talk about that when it comes to it. So I think first and foremost, let's talk about Dayna and her being in Vegas, since we were talking about Vegas. And I think this is one of the strong suits when it comes to this new adaptation. And we'll also be talking about the book differences as well a little further into the program. But I want to focus a bit more on what we were showed versus not really talking about the comparison just yet. But with Dayna this episode, what we got was, a little bit of a newer character who we hadn't been seeing. We only got a lot more of her last episode, sort of. And then she kind of was gone. We got her a bit last episode, and then she was gone at the end of this episode. She died a hero, protecting Tom. And I liked her as the aspect of her character. And I sort of wish that she didn't die at the end of this episode. I knew it had to come because she needed to protect Tom, but to me, I felt like that's why we maybe should have gotten a bit more of her before she left Boulder. It was like we got introduced to her just for her to leave. So it was like, okay. And now she's dead.
I thought, yes, I loved her last name or her nickname too, Flashdance.
Maxie is saying anything. Love Dana's nickname, Flashdance, very much so. That was very cool.
And I loved her character, and I thought it was one of the best or among the best and the most well-written arcs in the show, because we actually got to see payoff of a character, and the performance that Dayna gave during her limited run was really good. Like, I actually felt for her. Like, I knew like she was going to have the struggle that was going to be bigger than herself, but just like the strength and the gusto that she had behind it. Like, it was a shame she died, and I did want to see more of it, but I thought it was spectacular.
And I think it's also knowing Dayna's backstory, right? We got just a big glimpse of her with the zookeeper guy that we saw, which was such a chilling moment last episode, and what she had gone through, basically kind of being a sex slave for, part of the pandemic, part of what was going on. And then to come out of that and still be so strong and willing to give her life, because she knew the stakes going in there, going against this big bad dude of Randall Flagg. And to do that, I just was like, wow, this is such a cool character. And we only got a glimpse of her, because our main vocal point, and we'll get to her, our main two focal women, that we're focusing on in this show seems to be Frannie and Nadine. They both kind of represent the good and the bad of womanhood, I guess, in some forms, and we'll talk about that, but of what a woman character is and of where they stand on this. But then you had Dayna, and I was like, oh my gosh, Dayna should have, I'm not gonna say Dayna should have been Frannie, but I would have liked, not in terms of actresses, but just a little bit more focus on her, perhaps.
Yeah.
We got a Frannie.
A little bit.
Yeah, and Brent is actually saying in the chat that maybe it was just me, but seeing Flag turn his head and stare into the camera, it put chills down my spine when he smiled. During that big screen part, and he looked pretty much right at Dayna, it was like, okay, he sees her. I was creeped out too, because it was like he was still talking to everybody else, but to her, he knew she was already there. So that was a very creeped out moment. Yeah, and that's why it would have been good to see a little bit more of Dayna doing the spy thing, and maybe him getting into her head a bit more and what was going on there.
Yeah, I thought it was very well done. It could have had a lot more, but I don't know if in this case less was actually more, because I don't know if I would have felt as strong towards Dayna's character as I do. And it was just she was unfortunately a casualty, but she was a casualty that I really loved. And yeah, I didn't want her to die, but the fact, she died, unfortunately, her life in the series was bookended by sex villains.
That too.
That's really sad, how she was rescued from a truck and she was basically like one of the Mad Max women, and then bam, bottle to the throat at the very end. But in between that, it was very good, and I don't think the arc should have been as long. It shouldn't have been longer. I thought it was beautifully wrapped up. And the fact that somebody pointed out that you did show, I believe, it was Brent, staring to the camera. I think that was a subtle note, because Randall Flagg is the dark man, the evil spirit in the King universe. And I think only if anybody in the whole show should break the fourth wall, intentionally breaking the fourth wall, meaning like talking to the audience at home or looking to the audience at home. I thought the only person in the show that can do that is Randall Flagg.
Well, he wasn't breaking the fourth wall. He was looking at Dayna. That's what he was doing. That was the moment. It was showing that everyone else was seeing him talk regular, and he was looking directly at Dayna because he knew who she was. Yeah. And that's what made it so creepy. So it wasn't so much him breaking the fourth wall. It was more so an aside to Dayna. And I think that's when it got creepy too, because I think she also knew as well. And we're going to talk about, Brent is actually, mentioning the reference to the 90s version in the book. She died in a similar manner in the original TV series too. A lot of these characters need more development. Exactly. Yeah. And like Damon Robinson is saying, we didn't really get to know Dayna, but I liked her wardrobe in the episode. Thank you, Dave. I thought she looked fabulous in this episode. There was and definitely Vegas has a lot more fashion sense. I feel like Boulder, of course, because it's Colorado, has that middle America kind of everyone's wearing flannel vibe, and then you get to showy Vegas. So that was good aesthetically speaking, kind of showing the luxury of New Vegas that we saw. But I very much felt like that we could have gotten more Dayna. And Damon's also saying, I still hate this version of Lloyd even more after this episode.
I've been thinking of Lloyd, and Lloyd was the funniest version. He reminded me of this is a deep cut, totally get if people don't get this, but there was an episode of a show called King of the Hill back in the day, and Hank Hill is like this mild-mannered country boy from Texas, and in one episode he unknowingly dresses up as a pimp and he looks exactly like Lloyd, only he doesn't really know that he's getting involved in a sex trafficking dispute. And he's just putting on a fancy cowboy hat with a leather, and he's like, "Oh, that girl ain't right." And it's just like the way he looked, just like this dorky white. Lloyd is a dorky white dude dressed up as a pimp, and I was cracking up inside the entire time. The only thing missing was like a white-looking accessory. But I love the leopard print on Lloyd. I thought he was very Jack Sparrow-y.
Yeah, that definitely they very much had him being more flashy than the other version, and we'll talk about that a bit. But yeah, we have Lloyd, and we're showing a picture right now of Lloyd and Julie, who also made a reappearance. Julie was also there. She went from blonde to pink hair. People remember in the last episode we saw a flashback of Nick and Tom when they had first came across Julie and showing how mean she was to Tom and just being kind of a little out of her mind. So she ends up back. And she ends up in Vegas too. And so she's hooked up with Lloyd, but she's very much not into Lloyd at all. It seems like she's just kind of sticking to him because he's Flag's second in command. And so they have their whole thing. So they're kind of running things in Vegas, which kind of makes sense that we saw them earlier on in their roles and then seeing them be a part of Vegas. So that's a little bit of the inner circle, because we were talking about how we haven't seen Trash Can Man for those who are familiar with the book and the series, and who know, we'll see if we'll see him eventually. But we saw a little bit of things getting ran there, mainly in the tunnels and the places where they were doing construction and stuff. So yeah, so things are running. It seemed like there's a lot of debauchery, but not a lot of it. But we did get a glimpse with these two and the ridiculousness. They're kind of borderline comedy relief a little bit.
Yeah.
The two of them, Lloyd and Julie, in this, especially Lloyd. Lloyd definitely feels like comedy relief in this version that they're doing of him, which I don't mind. I just don't find him right-hand man-ish. So I'm kind of wondering, why does Flag have this guy as his right-hand person? You would think you need someone who's a little bit more of a muscle or something, like the guy, the security person who was showing Dayna around and was in the elevator and was there when Tom was getting put in there and telling him, hey, he doesn't go in the slave thing because he came here willingly. I would think of him more like a Lloyd, that guy.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think the reason that Lloyd is good in this, and no, I do agree that the prison scene, like, I really loved Lloyd when he was fragile, broken down in prison, and he needed a place to go. But I think now that Flag made him his second in command, I think, like, Lloyd deep down, like, this is his inner Lloydness coming out. And he's being flashy and flamboyant. And I think because the devil is all trickery and showmanship and glitz and glamour, and things aren't exactly how they appear. Like, all that glimmer isn't gold,
Yeah, all that glitters isn't gold. Yeah.
Glitter. And I think that's Lloyd.
Okay.
I think that's
I see that. Especially when Julie's able to just basically say Flag's name and he can't get hard anymore. Like, what's that about? It's just, some weird kind of, there's things under the surface, but not enough. Vera, who's joining us in the chat. Hi, Vera. She says too much exposition and not enough character development. I think that's kind of what we're all sort of feeling, that, like I especially said when I said with Dayna, I was saying, I really like this character. Now she's dead. Okay, that's cool. We could have got her a little bit longer, perhaps, maybe her life in Boulder. And then all we had was Frannie saying, yeah, she'd be great for this. And it was like, we just met her a second ago. It'd be cool for us to see why she'd be great to be a spy. Like, maybe a little bit more of her life in Boulder, a little bit more of what it was like before the pandemic hit. And she was thrown into the sex soup cult, things like that. We didn't get any of that, but she died valiantly. But it was like, okay, that sucks, because it would have been cool to see her a little bit longer before that happened.
Yeah.
It's
a shame. Like, once again, I feel bad that she got bookended by sex traffickers. And we're still talking about Dayna, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure, because the hardest part for me in this show was getting the names correct, because they do so much exposition and not enough show, that there's just so much to take in. So I just wanted to make sure that we're still on Dayna.
Damon's actually asking in the chat, so is the showgirl the new Ratman? Yes, that's another thing where it's like, they either are telling you stuff that they should be showing us, or they are showing us things that they're not explaining. So for those who, and we'll talk a little bit more with the show differences and things, for those who know about the character Ratman in the 90s version, this character that we saw this episode, the one who was on the mic explaining things, that's Rat Woman this time around, who honestly, her costume looks like a peacock. So I was I was like, that does not look like a rat. What is that? No. Like, why is she called Rat Woman? What is her, or is she going to talk a little bit more as the episodes go around for us to understand why she would be considered Rat Woman in this particular case? I'm not,
Yeah, like, you gotta also, when you write a book and you write a movie this big, like, you gotta think of how many characters you're gonna have, who's going to be drowned out, and who's gonna be relevant, and do you really need all of these characters in here? And you do when it comes to, like, everybody being in Vegas and you want to show that, like, Flag society is flourishing with all the sex and the violence and more of everything, more excess. I don't know if Rat Man or Rat Woman or Peacock Lady is maybe
Peacock Lady.
Peacock Lady, maybe gender bent fan service to the original. That may be. Like, I'm feeling like there's some.
Well, in the 90s version, he was a black guy who had a certain kind of way he talked that was kind of like a slither kind of rat guy type thing. And this woman's an announcer. So I don't know. But yeah, guys, that is Rat Woman. I just don't know why they did that if there's really no semblance. So maybe we'll see a little bit more. But okay, so we saw Vegas. Dayna died. Tom is there shuffling dead bodies around, and he's kind of seeing what things are. But we also found out that Flag cannot see into Tom's mind because Tom is a special guy. Of course, we love Tom. And probably because of, his mental issue, Flag can't see into his mind. And that's why he wanted to get at Dayna. But Dayna, of course, sacrificed herself. She wrote the note to Tom, run. Of course, Tom cannot read, so he cannot know that's what she said. It seems right now that the only person that knows about Tom is Julie. And she didn't seem in this episode, except for the mention that she gave to Dayna, very concerned with finding out about Tom anyway. So unless she goes to Flag in the next episode, then I'm not sure Tom is really in that much. Yes, God's Tom, as Vera is saying, God's Tom. They don't really go on that. We'll talk a bit more about that in the book difference of God's Tom and how he doesn't really make an appearance too much because they didn't do, as we were talking about in the last live, they didn't do the hypnosis thing where him being a little bit more conscious and things like that happened. He just kind of was told to go in there and see. So we didn't see that version, as they call it in the book, then God's Tom. That's not in there. So maybe that'll come up a little bit more, but that did not happen. So far, it just seems like because of his mental situation, Flag just can't seem to penetrate his brain. So Tom, so far in Vegas, is still safe. So those were the main things that happened in Vegas. I liked it. I thought we needed more debauchery because I think in 2021, we are a bit too desensitized to just regular Vegas and public sex and a few people dying. But it was nice to get out of Boulder for a little bit.
Mm-hmm. It was. Yeah.
So, okay. So then we went let's go to Harold and Frannie's situation. Because I think I want to talk about Nadine a little bit separately.
Yeah.
So Harold lost his buddy, Teddy, R.I.P., rest in heaven. Teddy, we love you. He died. Nadine shot him. And then Harold was pissed about that, rightfully so, because it was his only friend. And so what eventually happened is Nadine gives Harold a hand job to kind of calm him down. So we know they're kind of doing sexual stuff right now. And so Frannie invites Harold over to the house, but more so because she wants to spy on him because she senses that something's off more so than usual. And then we find, and it was one of the most awkward dinner moments. Oh my gosh, this dude is incel times 20. Mm-hmm. And we also find out Frannie asked Larry to break into Harold's house to see if there's anything going on. He has a locked basement, and we find out that what's in the basement is cameras because he has cameras in his house and he has a camera going into their house as well, in their bedroom of all places, which is also creepy. I didn't mind that. It was creepy. I felt like Harold was a bit cartoony this episode. I felt like they really just really went hard on the whole I'm like really stoic and then I have this weird smile. And I'm like, this is a little cartoony at this point that he does that so on the nose. And then I thought it was a little bit of a plot hole that somehow he was able to get cameras. Weren't they without power for like months? Like I'm just kind of confused how they were out power and then suddenly he has cameras.
Maybe he like broke into a Best Buy and just took a whole bunch of camera equipment and was hoping that maybe the power would come on, but that is just like psychotic level of post-pandemic planning. That is a very, very good point. And it almost felt like, cartoony is a very good word for this, because it almost felt like, this isn't anything like the show, but it got to a point where, like in a Family Guy episode where Peter Griffin can suddenly get a helicopter, like this guy suddenly has a security, and I'm waiting for the Herald copter to show up and just kind of hover over Fran's house. Like I thought, as far as growth goes and an arc, like we are very far away from curious incel Harold from the very beginning, looking through like the knot in the fence. Like this is elevated now.
Yeah, this is the evolution of incel Harold. And I think it also just shows that he's a bit far gone at this point. I know in the last live, I felt a little bit of sympathy for him because of losing Teddy, and that maybe he didn't seem as bad as he could have been. And I think this episode pretty much solidified that he's gone. He has a lot of resentment that's just not going away. And there doesn't seem to be any therapist left after the plague. So I don't think that's going to happen for him. And I do think he's far gone. Now, I don't know. Did you agree with the fact that Frannie had Larry go into his basement, into Harold's basement? I thought it was a little bit of a haphazard scheme. I was just like, first of all, you don't tell Stu because you don't want him to be part of this or whatever. But you go behind his back. You put Larry in danger because what if Harold has something there? And I just didn't think she really thought it through.
Yeah, I'm not sure because like Teddy died. Teddy is noticeably missing.
They faked his death. Nadine and Harold made it seem like he committed suicide.
Yeah, committed suicide. And I don't know if off of that they thought something was off, and maybe Frannie had a sense of urgency, like at any means necessary. Like something is off about Harold. I don't 100% agree, but I think it was a good tactical move. However, I think they underestimated how much of a psychopath that Harold actually is. Because when he got back and he noticed that, I believe, the Rook? It was like the Rook was off. And like that guy knew, not even looking at pictures, that something was off. Like one little item was off. I think as far as conflict and moving the story along, I think it was right. Frannie, I agree with Vera. She's not my favorite character.
I don't know. I'm not feeling her. I guess that's why when we got this Dayna character, I was Dayna's like, whoa, now this is a protagonist woman here.
Yeah.
And with Frannie, I'm just kind of like, I don't feel the conviction. I don't know what's fueling her. I know what was fueling Dayna because of the victimhood that she had to go through, her surviving in this post-plague world. With Frannie, I'm like, okay, you have your baby and things like that, but I'm not really getting it from her. There's something missing with me and Frannie and the connect to this character, even though we have seen her the most, one of the most characters we've seen.
Yeah, I was wondering if is she only important because she's bearing a child in this? Like,
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. Was that sexist? I don't know if that was, but
I don't think in this sense, because you're wondering what purpose this character serves.
Yeah, as far as characters go, like I'm wondering.
And I agree with you to some extent, because I think part of it is because she's having the kid, and then the other part of it is the fact that she's Stu, the main guy's love interest, and then the other part of it is that rejecting Harold is what spurns Harold, which is one of our main villains, sort of. And that's her role in all of this. Kind of a little stereotypical.
Exactly. Speaking of stereotypes, I just thought of this right now. I believe if Stu is like the president or the leader of this group, Stu, simple guy, worked at a factory in Texas. His mentality, think of a Texan mentality from like the viewpoint of like 1970, and it's still like pretty much of that of 2021 or whenever this plague actually is taking place in this fictional world. If you look from Stu's viewpoint, and I've lived in small town America for a decade, but if you look at Stu's viewpoint, Las Vegas, even though we're kind of technically like immune to it or like desensitized to it in the show, from that man's perspective, that is hell on earth.
Stu?
Yeah, from a conservative man's perspective, I think Vegas is hell on earth.
Okay, but what does that have to do with Frannie? What are you getting at about Frannie?
Frannie was, I think I might have backtracked.
Yeah, you went back to Vegas, which is fine.
And also, Frannie is like the cradle of the new civilization.
I see that. Okay, I get what you're doing. Like what Frannie represents versus what a character like Julie in Vegas represents. You know, she's genuine. She cares about people. Even what Nadine is on the cusp of representing. And we'll get to Nadine. Brent Showers is talking about it in the chat. We'll talk about Nadine in a second here. And then Damon is saying in the chat, Harold knew something was wrong. That's why he rushed home. I think so too. He just felt like something was off. Why is she's usually so skittish around him and stuff. Why is she about trying to keep him there? And then Vera is saying in the chat, she is just sitting around being pregnant and putting other people in danger.
That's all she's doing. Like, okay.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And let us know also, those of you who are watching the replay, if you're feeling Frannie or not. She's the main female protagonist right now, but I think there's starting to be a little bit of a consensus that we're not all very much solidified in believing that she deserves that title. So let us know in the replay, and thanks for joining us. And also be sure to subscribe if you have not already. And so basically we see that Harold is there and he knows what's up, clearly. But what do you think what I said about the plot point of how did he get those cameras?
I think he raided a Best Buy or a Walmart
or
whatever. Like, he's a shifty dude. He snuck out in the middle of the night. And it kind of goes back to Teddy back in the day. You know, like Teddy, he brings up that little thing.
DVDs.
Like, found DVDs. And it's like, normally in the store, minus 7-Eleven, you can buy, if there's DVDs, there's camera equipment in most big box stores in America. And now that, you know, people are dead, you don't have security, and money doesn't mean anything. Like, you can ransack, if Radio Shack is still alive in this thing, or Best Buy, or Walmart, Kmart, whatever. If there's an Amazon hub, they can raid, and they stole things there. I think it's easily available in the world.
Okay, well, maybe he got it and no one else decided they needed cameras in their house. Maybe it was just Harold that decided. I just thought that was so random that he's the one person who decided like that I need to have a surveillance system. But then again, that makes sense. If I'm in a new world and I think everyone's kumbaya, why would I put in a security system? Right? People probably don't even lock their doors in that neighborhood, right? So, okay. get it.
You go back to like conservative 50s Americana, we can leave our doors open for anyone.
Exactly. Okay, I get that. And then Harold's the one who doesn't belong in Boulder, right? So he's very much going to be going against that sentiment. And then we have Brent saying in the chat, what's so odd about this version of The Stand is I don't even like the Stu. That Stu is the main guy in this show based on how they jump around so much, seeing him here and there, but not prominent. I also agree with that. As we've been saying so far, there's a little bit of a lack of connection with some of our main characters who are supposed to be our main characters. And that to me is a shortcoming of the series so far. Damon is saying also that Harold probably got the cameras from the ski resort. That also might be a thing too. But I think, so you agree, Michael, that Harold has reached a new Saiyan, Dragon Ball Z reference, a Super Saiyan incel status.
Yeah, but over 9,000, right?
Yes.
Yeah, he's going over 9,000 in his creepiness. He's looking through walls. He's trying to have dinner at people's homes. He knows what's up. He is spying on the whole community. And the wild thing is he anticipated electricity coming back.
Yeah.
Like
maybe, yeah. He knew it. He was like, I'm going to get these cameras ready. Whatever. Sure. Okay, so people have been talking about Nadine. And we had Nadine. And I must say, I felt a little bit more connected to her this episode. I still got my issues with Amber Heard, but looking past that and looking at her as Nadine, what did you think about this episode? I felt like they kind of showed her have a little bit of conflict when she finally talked to Mother Abagail and going through this thing where she felt like Flag had sort of abandoned her or given her to Harold. So she kind of felt given up and she felt some type of way about that. She had sexual dreams about Larry, and then she went to Larry. And we got to talk about the difference of that with the 90s version when we get to it. But then Larry the one time Larry decides he wants to be a gentleman. Any other time a woman throws it at him, he takes it. But this time he decided, he wanted to be a gentleman. And he doesn't realize he sort of helped in sealing Nadine's fate. What did you think about that?
I thought that was a very good character arc. I actually, Amber's side, talking only and strictly for Nadine's character, I actually felt bad for her in a way. Like this was almost that was her point of no return, and she didn't necessarily bring that on herself at that moment. She kind of did and she kind of didn't, but that was the most vulnerable she ever was, and that sealed her doom.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think it wasn't that much resistance, though. And I guess we have to talk about a little bit in comparison to the 90s version, because it was like she could have just came back later and tried to say, I want to start a relationship with you and then sleep with them. But she just straight up went to him like, F me. And it was just like, well, if you really wanted this to happen, you could have kind of smoothed it over, be like, hey, you want to hang out? I mean, it wasn't like she's leaving Boulder tomorrow. She could have been like, hey, you want to have dinner tomorrow? And then kind of seduce him a little bit. And then they, do things. And that's that. It's just like, they just kind of went straight into come and sex me.
Yeah, it was not like, hey, power's back on. We're going to operate a Starbucks. Do you want to grab some coffee and we can talk things through?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the weird thing.
It was a little weird. And I felt like they had to do that because she needed that moment of no return. But because they didn't set up Larry to really have much reasoning to push her off, I just felt like it was like, okay, why this moment necessarily? And Brent is saying, imagine being predestined to be with the devil. Yikes. Exactly. Right. I think that is also a thing, and it kind of showed, and that's why I felt a little bad for her. I didn't feel too bad for her when she killed Teddy last episode. I was like, oh, I cannot stand Nadine at this point. And even in the beginning of this episode, she's like, we did what we had to do, Harold. We had to do it for him. So you also have to think about the fact that since she was 12 years old, she's been dealing with this situation with this being who has been always there for her, no matter what home she went to and stuff like that. So she has a very big dependency on the one thing she thought was constant in her life. That one thing just happened to be perhaps the Satan or a demon.
Yeah, it was, oof. Yeah, taking Amber out of the picture. Yeah, when she walked down the steps. Yeah, I actually felt bad. I did not. I think that was the most surprising thing of the show, was me actually feeling kind of bad for Nadine, because yeah, like, murderer. She's kind of like, when she killed Teddy, she was almost like queen status in a cult.
Yeah,
with the guy still above her.
yeah,
So she's still the victim, but she wasn't necessarily, off the hook
mm.
100%.
Yeah. I
But
agree with you. Yeah,
yeah, and it was just like, damn, like how ironic, and it's kind of karma in a way. Like, she kills Teddy, and her salvation is over. Like, there's no way she can ever get salvation anymore.
well, not necessarily from Teddy. I felt like, this was her moment. Even if she had really fallen in love with Larry, she could have probably been redeemed. It wasn't so, I don't think it was so much the killing of Teddy that was the point of no return. That's why I felt so mad at her. But they could have made it so she felt that her and Larry had something, because they didn't have resistance. There wasn't another person standing in between Larry wanting to be with her. So, no. And we talk about that in the differences with the 90s version. But yeah, as people are saying in the chat, they felt bad for her. Cage, hey, Cage, welcome to the chat. He's saying they showed Nadine was having hesitations. And then Matt C is saying, Mother Abagail telling Nadine she has choices. And I felt like that was a very prominent moment between that. I wasn't expecting her to run into Mother Abagail. Did that surprise you?
It did, in a way, because of how almost redeemable Nadine's character was. And when Mother Abagail told her that, I think Mother Abagail in this one, even though she's not God herself in here, she's just a mouthpiece. I think she knows, because she knows the situation. She knows what's going on. She can kind of read everyone who comes in.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there. And you kind of wonder, did she sense that Nadine was there from Flag?
Yeah, she probably could, because, we're talking about the Bible. This isn't like an evangelical talk show. But from the biblical perspective of the stand, even Jesus knew that somebody, going by that text, that somebody was going to betray him and sell them out. And he didn't think everybody was his friend and everybody's just super awesome and cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, so by that biblical perspective, as a voice piece of God, Mother Abagail probably knows that people are going to betray her as well.
A bit more. Yeah, I agree with you on that she's a bit more all-seeing. So she probably senses, and somehow she lets Nadine stay there. And Damon is saying in the chat, Larry could have saved her soul, Nadine's soul, with sex. Wow. Yes, sex could have saved her soul. More so made it so that she wasn't any longer promised to our main villain, this guy. So that was something. And then, moving into, as we talk about Mother Abagail, she was going through a bit of conflict herself this episode with Nick. She was very mad that they sent spies there. That was a very interesting conversation that she had with Nick, saying, you were supposed to be my voice, and you went against what I said, because, Mother Abagail right now is basically saying we shouldn't do anything. We don't know anything. But we find out one of the reasons why she's saying we don't know anything is because she hasn't been getting any visions from God or anything for who knows how long. So she feels kind of like she's been forsaken. And so she, saying a prayer to God, and then the wolf comes out, and then she leaves a note saying that don't look for me, I've left. Probably going on some spiritual journey. And I'm not going to say that came out of nowhere, but I thought it was interesting. I think this time I felt a little bit more of her spiritual conflict than in the other adaptation that I saw. So what did you think of that?
Once again, just based on like the show not doing the greatest job with every detail, even though it is a really good show, I thought this was like, F this, I'm out. Like, you guys, drug me here. I've been getting all these dreams. Everybody's been talking to me. I thought I'm this mouthpiece of God, but okay, cool. Like, you guys are doing your own thing. I wanted to die at Hemmingford Home And now I'm on this magical road trip and nobody's paying attention to me anymore. So I'm just going to get up and go. I was almost like, good for you, Mother Abagail. Like, I get it. But based off of the spiritual journey alone, I can understand that she was frustrated not being a mouthpiece of God, or being a mouthpiece of God, but not hearing it anymore. And she just wanted like a moment of clarity. And I think she took that out hard on Nick.
Yeah.
As well, too. So her frustration, she probably was a little miffed that they got up and left, and they kind of did things behind your back. But I also think the reason she was that angry was because she took out her own personal problems on the group. Because it is a group and these people still have their own individual freedoms.
Yeah, and there's also a collective going on there. I got it though why she was mad, because as she told Nick, she said, this guy can see you all. So basically, and we saw that with New Vegas, that Randall saw the two spies. The only person he couldn't see was Tom because of Tom's mind, but he basically saw them coming from a mile away. So in a way, they were walking into a trap. They were walking into a place where they were going to be sacrificed and killed pretty much, right? And had you kind of wonder, had they listened to Mother Abagail, maybe that wouldn't have happened to Dayna. Maybe that won't happen to the judge. Maybe, Tom wouldn't have needed to go there. What are they spying for exactly? You kind of have to wonder too. I mean, are they going to do an army to go after New Vegas and stuff? These are the things where you're kind of like, what exactly they're trying to find out. So it did kind of seem like she's supposed to be this sort of messiah, or at least a prophet in a way, and they're undermining her. So I saw her anger, and I actually thought it was good that we saw Mother Abagail's anger, because we'll talk about it in a second, in comparison to the 90s version, she was a lot more angelic and not as balanced in that sense. So as others are saying, she's a little bit grumpy, and I kind of appreciate it. The woman's like over 100-something years old. I mean, of course you're going to be a little grumpy at this point, right?
Yeah, she wanted to die. She was talking to her corpse friends in Hemingford home. And it seems like the way out in this series is by taking pills and overdosing. But I don't know what is they're marketing that. If every other method of suicide.
It's edgy. It's CBS. They're letting it be edgy. Sex and drugs.
Sex
and cocaine, which we saw in this episode. People doing coke in Vegas.
Oh, I mean, now too. Yeah, the only thing missing from modern day Vegas was the cards of all the sex workers on the street that you just step on. That was the only thing missing from that Vegas. Today's Vegas with more violence. But Brent Showers brought up, the 40 years in the wilderness.
He said it makes sense. She was saying something about 40 years in the wilderness statement. That was her going on her proverbial 40 years in the wilderness to find direction from God. Yes, it looks like she probably went on a spiritual journey, but everyone's left there not knowing what happened to the one reason why they came to Boulder in the first place.
I'd be mad too. I'd probably take it out on my people. I'd be like, yo, God, what's going on? I have to walk for 40 years and figure this out. What it was, how old is Randall Flagg going to be? Is he still going to look like this in 40 years? And are there going to be more people in Boulder to the point where Boulder eventually expands and Vegas expands and eventually they're going to have to lock heads? What is ultimately going to happen?
Yeah. What's the goal of it all? And I think that's what you and I were talking about as well, because I think that was my main issue with Vegas. I was like, it needed more intensity. It needed to seem like this kind of place is not stable. There's no way. But I kind of just saw a few extremes here and there. And I was like, if I'm supposed to believe this is some big epic battle that's supposed to happen between the forces of good and evil, I'm kind of like, well, we're in this day and age. And in the 70s, it would have made sense. But we're kind of in this day and age where a lot of people are like, live and let live. So it's kind of like, okay, that's what they want to do in Vegas. We'll do this in Boulder. Of course, Flagg is not for that. He wants to destroy Boulder for whatever reason. And we don't have that reasoning yet either. So maybe he'll make that more plain for those who don't know the story, right? Yeah. And so I just feel like we haven't gotten to the epic feeling in this series yet of the stand or the standoff.
And, yeah, right, the standoff. And it also going back, and I apologize for turning this into a history program, but I do have a minor in history. And I'm wondering if this book was written in the 70s, almost near the peak of the Cold War. And, they talked about like containment theory, like, staying far away from affairs and just letting them starve, and they can't coexist.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. This idea that these two places can't be able to stay, so eventually they have to go in conflict, which is why he sent Nadine and has Harold there in Boulder. And even though Mother Abagail didn't send it, Nick wanted to send the spies over to Vegas.
Yeah, that, and one side was seen as godless. So the other end upped the godness in it to the point where like they added like God in everything, like in God we trust, and in the pledge and everything. Like one side is way more religious, and then the other one is seen as godless and decadent. So there's very much a Cold War theme at play that isn't necessarily still as bad in play as now.
Yeah, and maybe that's why it doesn't feel as immediate. Maybe that immediacy is not there as much. So,
and that's why I think the personal struggles are more relatable, because I think on the world stage today, we're all dealing with personal struggles as an ideology more than East meets West or Colorado meets Nevada. So it's like apparently the only hub of the survivors is in the American Southwest.
That's the thing too. It's very, but that was the old one too. It's very Americanized. You don't know what happened to China or Russia or Australia or any other place. In the book they tell you said?
In the book they talk about the waves and how it decimated everybody. But it would be cool to see a cultural perspective of like how everybody else, like across the pond, like East and West, dealt with this.
Okay, so that was kind of the major things that happened in the episode itself. And so we need to get to the book differences and the 90s versions differences. But before we get to that, I want to give a shout out to one of our replay watchers, Mr. Ben G, MRBENJY, who actually, we had a question in the last live stream, which was Susan, the person who was originally on the council as well in the 90s version, and how we didn't see her. And I had surmised that basically Susan was the woman that got shot in the head when Dayna had got rescued. And Mr. Benji, he actually explained that in the book, Susan was on the council. So we were right about that. So most likely we will not be getting Susan in this series, as she was the one who probably got shot in the head. But R.I.P. Susan.
R.I.P.
But thank you, Mr. Benji. And also, if we have any questions and you guys answered in the replay or the chat and subscribe, definitely, I love that. We love it. And so I love giving you all shout outs when you answer the things that we don't know, because we're not all knowing. Okay, so show and book differences. Main ones: rat woman.
Oh yeah, rat woman.
We have a rat woman instead of a rat man. Although, if you did not know the story, I don't think anyone would have known that person was supposed to be rat woman. She looked like a peacock.
Yeah, peacock lady.
Yeah, so that was one difference.
Was that a subtle dig at NBC?
No, maybe they were trying to make a dig at NBC. The other difference was the fact of Nadine going to Larry. Now, in the 90s version by then, and this is why, once again, I don't think we're going to get a Lisa, guys, because Lisa was in the 90s version. She was also in the book too. But Lisa in the 90s, in the book version, was someone who Larry meets when he gets to Boulder. And they form a relationship. And it's actually in the 90s version, it's Larry and Lisa who are helping to raise Joe, because Nadine isn't significantly in Boulder by that point. And so what happens is that Nadine goes to Larry, who had feelings for her, of course, but he's now with Lisa. And Lisa knows that he wants Nadine, but she's also, for whatever reason, cool with that, because she's like, well, I know you're not going to cheat on me, or I'm okay. I know you love her more, but, I'm willing to settle. That was kind of weird in the book and the 90s version. And so Nadine goes to Larry as a last-ditch effort to not be promised to Randall. But Larry rejects her on the strength that he chooses his life with Lisa. So it's a little bit more defined. And in this case, there is no Lisa. He's not raising Joe. Nadine is. And they just basically kind of made it so he wanted to be a gentleman. Yeah. And he kind of missed his shot. Do you like this version versus the other one of this particular incident?
I almost like the other one, but I understand the arc, like Larry, becoming, big in the music world, fame is getting to his head. He's blew all kinds of money on drugs and women. And so as far as the storytelling arc goes, the fact that Larry turns down Nadine in this one, I think is a really good arc. However, like, I know Larry's arc is not complete, and I'm wondering like how they're going to move on from here to make Larry even better of a man than he is. However, I do enjoy the Larry plot that is happening here. I do also really love the original Larry Underwood, because he felt like you knew he was a pop star. Larry Underwood in here is a guitarist and has.
You have real problems with the fact that he hasn't really sung yet.
I kind of do. It's kind of like, because Larry was a part of that. He was like playing his guitar. He was, like you had the song on the radio, but Larry just seems now like he was a guitarist in a band more as an actual front man in a pop band or a rock band. I'm really torn on Larry. I like his character in this, but I prefer the original one better.
Yeah, I agree with you to some extent. I just don't think, I actually think that, and yes, actually Zen actually corrected me in the thing. I was thinking, Lisa, I'm horrible with names, guys. One of the other things, I had a thing where I called someone Andy and their name was Danny, but I'm talking about Lucy. That's who Larry was with originally, not Lisa. It was an L name, but it's Lucy who Larry is with in the 90s version. And in this case, I don't think we're going to get her in that sense just yet. My thing with it, I think, as others have said, we've gotten a lot of tell me instead of show me. And because of that, we didn't have that time to really be with Larry long enough like we did in the 90s version to then see him kind of hook up with Lucy and build a life with her and kind of be like, this is my wife in name. We didn't get that fast forward to Boulder of him being there for months and having grown and stuff. So it would have felt kind of shoehorned in if he had, like, honestly, the way it's looking, it looks like he's only been in Boulder for like a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two. So it's kind of like, it would have been weird had he, like, now that they structured it, him coming in there with Nadine, if he fell for some other chick and already basically pushed her away on that strength. So I felt like they kind of put themselves in a corner there because they didn't give enough time for him to get into another relationship with anyone else. So they kind of had to put in the scene of her point of no return and then the rejection. I just felt like, to me, because like in that 90s version, he kind of like pushes her off of him because he's like, you come in here, you disrespect me and my wife. And, Nadine's laughing at him. It was a much more intense scene to me in the 90s version. And in this one, it was kind of like, well, he could have just asked her out the next day. He could have been like, yo, let's go out tomorrow. I'm available. It wasn't like, it wasn't so much in stone that I felt like, but somehow Nadine took it like it was a moment in stone. And it was like, well, technically you could just go out with him tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And I think what is missing is the attitude behind Larry, because original, like, made for TV Larry, they're both made for TV, but 90s Larry had that New York gusto to him. And he was like, I'm going to be number one. It's like, hey, Lucy, you don't have that. You don't have the passion that you do with Larry Underwood in this one.
A lot of the characters are understated in this version, which I think makes it hard to really have a strong emotion about them. Everything's a little bit calmer, a little bit more slick, which maybe works in some cases and doesn't work in others. The other change, I think those were the two main changes that I saw. And the one of, was there another change? Those in the chat and those in the replay, let us know if you saw any major differences when it came to, I think those were the main, to me, plot point wise, was the thing with Nadine and Larry. To me, that was a major thing there.
There was one that I remember from the 90s to this one. There's probably more than one. So yeah, feel free to drop them all. One thing I remembered is in the 90s one, I think Dayna's spy character sees Tom as a construction worker on his lunch break.
Mm-hmm.
And they're by like missile silos and stuff. And they're by oil and missiles and everything. And because the whole thing in that one was there was a character, I don't want to spoil it just in case he comes in later.
Yeah.
But there was less of an urgency in the 90s one as there was in this one, because Tom is seen up above or from up above by Dayna looking down at Tom dragging bodies in this pit.
Yes, that was, and I kind of like that change of exchange where Dayna goes to him and she tries to tell him, like, I lost, my mother gave it to me. And of course, Tom doesn't get it. And that was kind of a sad moment where she was really trying to warn him and she gives him the note and it's, run, and he can't, he says MOON. And in the other one, in the 90s version, Dayna did know about Tom because I think all of them knew about each other already. In a way too. And then that was the thing where Dayna decides to basically, she breaks the glass and then she throws herself on top of it, which was just equally as dramatic as the way Dayna died in this one. I mean, one could argue it's probably more brutal to like totally stab herself as opposed to just letting her body weight kill her.
Yeah.
The other difference with the 90s version is that in this one, Randall Flaggs only flashed his eyes. In the 90s version, he pretty much changed shape a little bit for a second. Didn't he get like really angry?
I was waiting for the practical effects to kick in where we only saw the eyes, but instead of and then he had like horns and stuff. And like he was all like
moments where he did that. And they aren't doing that yet. Maybe it's going to be even more intense when he kind of changes. If they're making us wait so long for seeing parts of his true self,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved it. Maybe they were afraid that some of the special effects in the 90s were a little campy, but it is like, 25 years later? So I would have loved to have seen like
something cool. I hope they do practical effects. If he eventually changes shape into a demon, that was a change we have not seen yet. I hope it's practical effects and not crappy CGI that just looks so computerized. Fingers crossed, y'all. And other people, and I think this was something you were very excited about when the end of the show came, which was Don't Fear the Reaper was playing. There's a few people in the chat who are loving the fact, and we loved it too. I thought that was, I think they should have kept that song throughout. Honestly, I don't know why they changed it. I feel like that would have tied it. It was such a great song for the series.
The best part of the original is they did that and they set up everything. Like they played the entire guitar solo in the original. Like the original Blue Oyster Cult Don't Fear the Reaper is 8 minutes, and it's either 8 to 13 depending on what version you hear. But the other one that I loved was in Vegas when they played Lick It Up by Kiss.
Oh yeah, they did. They played Kiss. You're a big Kiss fan, so
Kiss fan. I'm looking for the vinyl right now. That's why I'm leaning in.
Damon in the chat is saying, I like 90s Larry better. He had a reason to turn her away. This one was kind of unrealistic with Frannie and Stu and probably others shacking up. He's going to turn arguably the hottest chick in Boulder down, right?
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. I was like, the one time, and maybe that was their way of showing Larry's growth, because we did see up to that point that every time he got offered sex, he pretty much said yes and did it. And the one time where he could have, and that would have helped Nadine, he chooses to be quote unquote a gentleman because he wants to build something with her. I don't want you to regret this later. And it was like, this is the one time he chooses for some reason, because we don't really see this growth. We just see this moment where he kind of changes what he would normally do. And so it's like, okay, it just didn't seem as strong of a choice to me of giving this character a choice, especially when Nadine's not leaving town. They could have hooked up later. He could have been like, well, I'd like to take you out, or maybe you come over later. Like in the other one, when Larry had a wife, it made complete sense that he was her only shot. And he was like, I am not doing this with you. That was the end of it. She had no other choice. But, you know, in this case, I was like, well, she still got a chance with him. He didn't tell her completely no. You know, so that was, and then other people are actually pointing out. Go ahead. Sorry to cut you off.
Sorry, I cut you off in the past. It was a very fun convo. Yeah. Oh man, I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, why you remember that? I was going to say people have also noticed, Brent was saying, anyone notice Flag's eyes look like the dead lights?
Yes.
That was a thing. That's very much, for those who don't know, that's a very Stephen King thing, the dead lights with Pennywise and things like that. So that was a good callback, I think.
I wore the shirt on the last episode.
Yeah, you did. You wore the It shirt. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think we're getting glimpses. But once again, see, we notice the dead lights and stuff like that. I still don't think this show is as completely approachable for people who do not know anything about the Stand. I still think this is one of those inner already established following kind of shows, kind of for not fan service necessarily, but you definitely need to already be acquainted with the story.
It definitely rides the line of
because I don't know how many people would really stick it out had they not already been familiar with it so far.
Yeah, that and I got a real sense of urgency from the miniseries that I don't necessarily get this one. It's not like a collective sense of urgency. There's more of an individual sense of urgency.
Yeah. So we asked you in the beginning, y'all, which character did you identify with the most this episode? So I hope you were thinking about it. Let us know in the chat. And also for those of you who are watching the replay, let me know in the comments. Also, once again, my other question was, are you feeling our main characters thus far? Or do you feel a disconnect like all of us are saying? Let us know. But those of you in the chat and on the replay, let us know which character you identified with most this episode or even liked the most this episode. So, Michael, you had time to think about this. Who did you identify with the most this episode?
I think old Mother Abagail.
Yes, why?
Mother Abagail, okay, because the plague is happening. She's the only person surviving. She wanted to die in Hemmingford Home. And I'm not relating because I actually want to live, but hear me out. So she wanted to die, and she didn't know what was going on. She's a character who internalizes a bunch of stuff, and she kind of questions things going around. And this whole time, she's the vocal mouthpiece of God. She's sending out her dreams to everybody. And they go to Boulder. And she doesn't know that other people are planning things. They all think she's her. And then she finds out that people are going behind her back to send spies and do a whole different thing.
Yeah.
And going back to the F this, I'm out. Like I traveled, I'm in my 100s, and you're not listening to me. I would be so mad. And completely so Mother Abagail, like she went full whoopee when she's debating somebody on The View. She's like, I'm gone.
Yeah, she was kind of like, but I don't even think, I think you and I had a different interpretation of it. I felt like more so she left because she just felt like she was losing her way there. It was like, what's going on? They're sending spies. I haven't heard anything directly from God. What's going on, And so in my opinion, I feel like she left because she felt like internally she needed to get right again so that she could help whatever they're supposed to do going forward. So I definitely see that. For me, I identify most with, I felt like, I think I said Dayna originally, not for any of the traumas or whatever like that, but just the idea of being so gung-ho about what she believed in. being like, there's a reasoning, I have a purpose. Because she could have been like, I don't want to go, I just got out of this situation, I'm not going to Vegas or whatever like that. And she could have stayed, but she chose knowing the danger and was kind of like, this is bigger than me. This is more than myself. This is for the future. And also kind of sacrificing herself for Tom, which, other people probably wouldn't have done that because they look at this Tom guy. Why am I sacrificing myself for the mentally, disadvantaged person or whatever like that? That's how people would see him. That's not what he is. But, she didn't do that. And I don't even know if I identify with her or I just really felt her. And I guess that's why I keep saying I wish that she was around longer than she was. H. Hauserman, thanks for joining us in chat, is saying, love New Vegas. Where were those guys nailed to the telephone poles? I was hoping to see them in that aerial shot scene. Harold Lauder's smile at the end of the episode with Blue Oyster Cult. Perfect. That was definitely... that was the one time when the smiling of his didn't seem as cartoony to me at that moment. It was like, okay, now we're getting into how it's supposed to go. So, yeah. He says, Mother Abagail does not come across as a 108-year-old woman who can still make her own bread. Too much Whoopi, not enough Abby. Okay.
Exactly. That's why I'm like, this feels like she's pissed off from The View. And
well, I don't know. I feel like we're getting a more realistic version of the Mother Abagail from the book. Mother Abagail from the book was a bit closer to the way of the public demeanor of Whoopi Goldberg. I think that's why she was such a great casting for the adaptation of her in the book. Versus, I will probably be saying this throughout the series with the differences, her arguing with Nick. She didn't argue with Nick in the 90s version. No. She was just mother of love and light. And now she's got a little darkness to her, which I kind of appreciate. I think it gives Mother Abagail a bit more of a story arc.
Yeah, there was exactly. And there wasn't any of this in the original. It was very melodramatic.
Yes.
Because even Nadine is wildly different, not only with the hair situation that was brought up
grown on me,
yeah, she's grown on me. And also we don't get a ton of cutscenes with Nadine going, Larry, like we don't get that. And that happened a lot in the original one.
Yeah.
And she's not like, we're damned.
Yeah. Well, that might happen. I mean, we don't know. It might once she gets to Vegas. We don't know how that's supposed to go on. Okay. So we basically did the overview. We were saying how we were feeling. So for me, my favorite episode of this season thus far is still episode 3. Episode 4 was good. I think it could have been better. I think we could have got more Vegas. And overall, though, I think we're okay with the way things are going with the show. So yeah, let us know more in the comments and in the, chat. Hey, Diane, thanks for joining us. Hey guys, how it's going? We're towards the end of the live, but of course, when you watch the replay, let us know your thoughts and things like that. And, let us know, once again, answer the question. Are you feeling Frannie? I think that's my main thing. I was like, she's the main woman and I'm not feeling her. And yes, we did get a lot of dying this episode. And it's Damon keeps talking about Roy. Are you talking about Ray or Roy? Who's Roy, Damon? Let us know. Who are you talking about? He's saying it's so much going on and no one's letting me in on. They send in spies. Mother Abagail done snuck away, and to have this. Ray. You're talking about Ray, who they changed from being. Ray was originally a guy in the 90s version.
Yeah, okay.
The woman, the indigenous woman that is playing Ray, and I totally agree with you. Ray has such a pivotal role and we only see her in bits and pieces when she has to find out, when she's saying she left us, Mother Abagail left us. And I'm like, I want to know more about Ray too. I do agree with you because we're not getting a lot of Ray. We're getting a lot of these other main characters who I don't have much of a connection with. So that is something. And Cage is still agreeing with me. Yes, Cage, that episode 3 was the best one thus far. But yeah, let us know in the chat, in the comments. And also, y'all got to answer the question, which character did you identify with best the episode? Damon identifies more with Ray this episode, being like, I am out of the loop. What is going on? Why is no one telling me all this stuff? Y'all sending spies. Mother Abagail done left. Yes, Ray was the victim of this episode. She should be on the council too.
Yeah.
And somehow she's not. That's a little weird. The only woman on the council is Frannie. I think, in this case, there should have been another woman, but Susan got shot in the head. Okay. So, maybe that's why I'm not liking Frannie, because so much is being put on this character. And I don't think she's holding up. So. No,
and I think it's because we don't have Molly Ringwald or an actress who can bring that, melodrama.
I don't know if it's even that. I just feel like maybe they're not giving her a lot to work with.
Yeah, they're not, because, the original Frannie was what? She was very expressive.
Just like that.
No, look at all of them. Yeah. Molly Ringwald. If you come here for the best Molly Ringwald impressions. But, it's just, she doesn't have the emotion. She's lacking something.
Zen is saying in the chat, I didn't like Frannie much in the old miniseries either, but this one is less whiny so far. I do agree with that. She's a bit more real world, a bit more grounded. I can agree with that. And also earlier in the chat, someone was saying, I think it was Brent, about the potential of Frannie's baby and what role the baby may have. So I think we'll see that play out more. And Diane is saying that Frannie is a little bland to me. She's a little bland to me too. That's why I wanted Dayna to stick around. But Dayna was a breath of fresh air to me.
Yeah.
And then she was gone. And I was like, we ain't gonna get Dayna again. We got her for one full episode. And it was like night and day in terms of the dynamic thing going on there. So that kind of sucks. But yes. Okay, y'all. So we dive deep. We broke down episode 5, New Vegas.
Yeah.
We're in Loathing in New Vegas. We got about, I think, 4 or 5 more episodes left of this season or this mini series. Who knows? Maybe they'll do it. I don't know. We'll see. And yes, that spells perhaps season 2. I don't know. But yeah, thank you all for joining us. Please, if you haven't subscribe already. Also turn on notifications so that you are the first to know when I post my videos, and be sure to leave comments and chat and give a thumbs up to this video if you like it. Thanks so much for joining us. And as always, let's get creepy together. Thanks.